All right. I'm going to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. If everybody's ready, if we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Buttry? Here. Ms. Bindum? Here. Mr. Fell? Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Otto?
Here.
Mr. Storr?
Here.
Mr. Trail?
Here.
We do have a quorum. Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
And approval of the minutes. We are still awaiting completion of December 4th, 2014 minutes. We will have to consider those at probably the next meeting. But we do have in our packet minutes from December 18th. So if I could get a motion and a second, that would be great. Moved by Mr. Trail, seconded by Mr. Hopkins. Any changes, typos?
Well, I think there's one typo on page 5.
Mr. Storr?
Yeah, just one. I think ration is supposed to be ratio.
Okay, where is that for Ms. Andel?
It's on page 5.
You might want to be a little more specific.
Okay, last paragraph, second line.
Okay, my page numbers got cut off.
Page 5.
You mean I could just count the pages rather than looking at the numbers? And I think that's it. Okay, ratio instead of ration on page 5. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes with that change? That was a pretty weak bunch of ayes. Any opposed? The minutes are passed. We do have some communications that came to us, one of which is from Adams Outdoor Advertising. I believe they'll be addressing the commission, so maybe I'll have them touch on the points that are outlined in the memo during that. Their testimony. We've got a letter from Bill Brown expressing concern over safety factors involving white backgrounds in digital OASS boards, and also wondering whether the foot candle of 0.3 in ambient conditions might be lowered to 0.2, and in general lower the brightness somewhat from what is outlined in the ordinance currently. We've also got a letter from Mr. Scott Dossett, essentially opposing digital billboards in any form due to safety and aesthetic concerns. So those are our communications. And without further ado then, I will open this continued public hearing, planned case 2242T14, request by the zoning administrator to amend Article 9 and 11 of the zoning ordinance to establish regulations for digital outdoor advertising sign structures. And if I could just briefly run through the procedure for our hearings. Staff will present a summary. The petitioner will make a statement and introduce evidence. And other proponents of the measure may be heard. Opponents of the measure may speak and present evidence. Other people may speak to the Plan Commission. City staff may have additional evidence or clarification, and then the petitioner may rebut, and opponents may rebut, and then the petitioner may present a final summary of their case. And then I'll close the public input portion of the hearing, and we'll discuss further amongst ourselves and may possibly vote on the case. So, Mr. Engstrom.
All right, thank you. So to pick up where we left off from our previous meeting, staff had presented our proposal for text amendment to allow digital billboards, otherwise known as outdoor advertising sign structures, in the Urbana zoning ordinance. And Plan Commission had several questions for staff to research. We were able to get that research done for you and have presented a memo with the answers to those questions. I'll just run through a couple highlights. There was a concern about possibility of having 3D, 3-dimensional images or optical illusions on digital billboards. We've revised the text of the proposed ordinance to address that in new proposed section 9-6E3. There was a lot of discussion about brightness level and pedestrian safety. Plan Commission had concerns about billboards being too close to the road and too bright and possibly impairing vision of drivers and imperiling pedestrians. Staff did some research to find out if any other cities address this through either greater setback distances or other potential mitigation efforts. We did find a few examples of municipalities that have greater setback distance requirements from intersections for digital billboards, but there were very few of those. So we provided a table with those that we were able to find, and you can see they range from 50 to 200 foot setbacks from intersections. Another question was if cities require billboard companies to vary the brightness of a billboard based on the setback, or conversely, if they vary the setback based on the brightness. Staff could not find any examples of that in other cities' codes. There were some questions about lighting levels of traditional billboards. We were able to find some cities have strict controls on lighting of traditional billboard faces. Some require lighting only to be from up top instead of from below. It's probably to address concerns of sky glow. A few municipalities have a foot candle limit on the level of light striking the billboards, and those were in the 50 to 70 foot candle range. Of course, the actual light bounced off of the billboards and reaching the viewer would be at a much lower level. Just wanted to go over a couple existing protections that we have in our zoning ordinance. Section 96.d.11 requires that any light from a digital or from a OASS has to be shielded from roadways and from residential uses. So that's existing language that we have. Also, we have in section 6-8D of the zoning ordinance, we have some limits on lighting. We state that lighting shall not be a hazard for motorists, bicyclists, or pedestrians, and also it shall not be a nuisance to the public or nearby properties. So if we find out any light in the city is creating a hazard or a nuisance, we can order it to be remediated or removed. There was a little research we did about the Illumination Engineering Society of North America. They noted that light from digital billboards is directional. It's projected in a particular direction, and that's at vehicles approaching the sign or the billboard from far away. So as you approach a billboard, the angle of view becomes much more oblique, and the amount of light reaching you as you approach and pass it is much lower than the light projected straight forward. So that's a consideration to keep in mind. So for this item, staff recommends against adopting additional buffers for signs or digital OASS near pedestrian crossings based on brightness. Additional setbacks would reduce the amount of developable space on a parcel. And we did a little analysis of where billboards are placed currently. And really, like I mentioned, if a billboard is on the close side, if imagine you're approaching an intersection, as you approach it and stop at the red light, if the billboard is near the side you're on, it's going to be off to the side and probably won't be causing much glare. If it's on the far side of the intersection, we found that billboards facing intersections are generally set back 160 to 200 feet from vehicles parked, or not parked, but stopped at those intersections. So we feel there's already a pretty hefty setback, just given the width of right-of-way plus the required setback width. Let's see. In terms of violation fines, there was some concern by the commission that the proposed fines for digital billboards would not be high enough to disincentivize companies from adhering to those standards. Pardon me. We discussed this with the city attorney. He felt that having a higher level of fine would perhaps be seen as a chilling of free speech and could be unconstitutional. So he recommended keeping the fine at the proposed level of $100 per violation. But he did confirm that each day the violation occurs is a separate violation, so those fines would add up. There was some question about should hold time for images be different at intersections, and the commission asked what are the traffic signal cycle times. We spoke with the city engineer, and on Cunningham, University, and Lincoln, all of those thoroughfares where billboards are allowed, the longest cycle time is 110 seconds, and that's at Cunningham and University. So that's significantly less than the proposed hold time of 3 minutes. The city engineer was in favor of keeping the hold time for billboards at 3 minutes, since signal times are shorter than that. Staff also could not find any examples of a city that varies or that has different hold time requirements near intersections. So we recommend keeping the 3 minute hold time. And that also allows for consistency with our hold time on electronic message boards. There was a question about annual licenses or fees. We found that in the state of Illinois it is possible to establish such a license or fee. The city of Rockford charges $550 per year per digital billboard. City of Chicago, $400 per year. We checked with the city attorney. He said it's possible to set a fee, but again, the level of the fee should not be unreasonably high. And the program to have a license would be separate from the zoning ordinance. So that's something that staff could look into if city council asks us to, possibly when we do the updating of fees every year. There was a question about Metcad. can Metcad charge the billboard operator to provide the emergency messages that we are proposing to require? The city attorney has definitively stated that is not a possibility. However, he did take a closer look at the language related to Metcad, and he had some additional language that he wanted us to add. So that has been added under 96E5. It's basically just providing an example of and what kind of emergency alert would be allowed, or what kind of emergency alerts Adams would have to allow Metcad to grant them access for. Okay. Interstates versus local roads. We couldn't find any, or we found a couple examples of cities that regulate billboards near interstates differently than interstates on local roads. It's a rare occurrence. Staff is against that distinction, as it would be hard to administer, and some billboards are visible from both interstates and from local roads. So buffer distances. This was another thing Plan Commission asked us to look at. What are the different buffer options to show where digital billboards would be allowed? So we've provided a few maps in our packet, and it's not popping up. Okay. Well, luckily I had a backup. Also provided an interactive map link. So as you can see, here's the originally proposed 1,000-foot buffer between billboards, or that's actually the currently required buffer in our zoning code, which we're proposing new digital billboards would have to abide by. As you can see downtown, all of the billboards are within 1,000 feet of each other, as shown with the orange dots are the billboards, the yellow circles are the buffer, and the blue areas are areas eligible for a billboard per other zoning restrictions. So if you look at a smaller buffer, say 500 feet, the same still applies. There's a little bit more room for our new billboards in these blue areas, but really not very much. So you'd have to go to a very small buffer to allow for a lot of new digital billboards. And even then, a lot of the space, especially downtown, is not zoned for digital billboards or any billboards, and is either not zoned correctly or is too close to residential or recreational uses. One last question was about our existing language. We allow for billboards within 660 feet of these corridors or the interstate. This language basically conforms to state and national regulations. We feel it should be maintained for consistency with those other regulations. So that is the updates. Adams is here. They would like to give some public input at that time, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Engstrom. Any questions for Mr. Engstrom? Mr. Trail? Looked like a question was emerging.
What's the effect of taking no action at all? Can they build as many as they want in the existing locations, or?
No, they're prohibited by the ordinance, so they would continue to be prohibited.
Another. I sort of have a question of, it seems sort of clear from, the language of the ordinance that we have a sort of public policy to reduce or eliminate billboards within the urban area of Urbana. What would be the practical effect if we simply continued to prohibit digital billboards over time? Do the current non-digital billboards become increasingly not financially viable and might disappear on their own?
That would be a question for the petitioner. I could tell you most of the current billboards are non-conforming, and as such, they can't be extended, or their life can't be extended. So eventually, over the decades, they'll fall down.
So basically, if we just simply continue to prohibit digital billboards, we'll eventually have the practical public policy effect of eliminating billboards within the area where they're not specifically allowed.
True.
Okay?
I would,
Tyler?
I mean, I just, maybe with one exception, these are extremely strong, solid structures. So I don't think it's like some other buildings where you can leave them alone for years, they'll crumble. I don't think that's the case. So I think that they're there to stay, unless the market changes. Adams can talk about the different leases. Some of these properties they own, some they have very long-term leases. So those are likely to remain, as long as there's a market for outdoor advertising, and there's been one since the automobile age, right? Those are likely to stay in some form. So I just wanted to throw that caveat out there that, do nothing would probably result in more or less the status quo of what we have today for a very long while, I would say.
Mr. Trail? No? Okay.
I had a quick question about part of this is that in return for allowing some billboards to be converted to digital, that there would be a trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
That they would have to allow any owner who wanted to convert their billboard to digital, who owned additional properties, would have to eliminate others. If they didn't own additional properties, would they have to obtain the rights to additional billboards and eliminate those to be able to build theirs? And the second part of it is, who gets to choose which ones are eliminated?
Well, to answer the second part, it's the owner who's proposing a new one would get to choose. But back to your first question, we kind of addressed this at our last meeting. It's kind of silent on what happens if a new player tries to enter the market. As it's written, it appears they would have to obtain the existing billboards they need to tear down.
Is that good? Any further questions for Mr. Engstrom? Mr. Otto?
Refresh my memory. Practically speaking, the ordinance, the way it's written, how many digital billboards could be built in Urbana? And the current number of billboards and the restrictions on where these could be located?
Well, it would depend on a lot of things. So there's a lot of areas, all these dark blue areas, you could build a new digital billboard. Any of these existing dots that are not within a yellow circle could be converted, assuming they take down the appropriate number of billboards. So we didn't really run those numbers because I think the possibilities are pretty much endless. Practically speaking, I think where Adams wants to build 1 or perhaps 2 digital billboards. So that's what we're anticipating. Then they would have to take down the equivalent number depending on the trade-offs. So between 2 to 4 per billboard they want to build.
So,
And then just to add to that, in certain locations, they might even have to take down more because of those buffers. I think we went over that last time,
Yeah.
too. So.
I'm trying to get an understanding of, practically speaking, in high visibility, I mean, the number of places that are blue where there are currently billboards, is actually along Cunningham, one on North Lincoln there. They're not going to go north on North Lincoln above Route 74. No one goes up there much. So let's say if they built 2 digital, we might get 4 to 6 others taken down.
That's possible, yep.
And then on the annual licenses and fees, did you find out anything on, I did, a bit of reading, but I wouldn't hang my hat on my reading. Apparently, some municipalities have a lease fee on personal property, so that the revenue generated from leasing personal property, and they have. So enumerated in examples of this are billboards, so that and that ranges from 1.5% to 6%. I'd like to get some of this on the record. It seems to me that the billboard industry, as I have read some of the legal history, at times, if the federal highway is widening and they have to remove billboards, they argue that this is real estate and they should be reimbursed. The taking should be based upon the income generated from the real estate. And then at other times, when cities want to tax it as real estate, they say, no, this is not real estate because the billboards are removable. This is personal property. And so some municipalities sort of circumvent this by having a lease fee, which an example of, we do that on motel rooms, for example, as a way. So the billboards only have value if there's highways and drivers. And somehow or another, the industry is not paying their fair share of the expense of maintaining roads and infrastructure and so on, so that the eyeballs come by there. So they want to have it both ways. So, so I'm really sort of stuck on, it seems to me, $400 or $500 per year fee for a billboard that's generating, if they're investing $250,000 to $500,000 for these things, is a kind of pittance. And we can simply say no. We don't want digital billboards, period. It seems like if they want the privilege of having digital billboards in this community, there should be some way for them to contribute to the cost of maintaining this community so that they would want to put the billboards here. They want us to provide the streets and the eyeballs and so on, so there should be some way for them to make a commensurate contribution to that the way every other business does. The fast food businesses, everybody else contributes to the cost of the infrastructure of this city. And so I'm stuck on this, and I want to have some,
Well, maybe we can pursue that further when we get into discussion.
yeah.
Any further questions for Mr. Engstrom? I do have a couple of specific, unless Ms.
I
Seiler.
didn't know if you wanted to talk about Bill Brown's letter, or wait for the questions on that.
Yeah, we could discuss that a little.
Well, he had some specifics about white background was one. Concerns about white background and a recommendation not to allow white backgrounds. And then to lower the foot candle and knit, basically the luminosity and the brightness of the things. I don't know if you want to address those 2 points.
Yeah, just like he had mentioned, in terms of content, we really can't regulate colors or what they're displaying. But he did mention that he would support a light level limit of 0.2 foot candles over ambient levels. Again, to go back over our research, most cities have light levels in the area of around 0.3 foot candles. Some are a little lower, some are higher. Some measure them in nits instead of foot candles, which is really not a direct conversion. It's nits is the light emitted from a light source, and foot candles is light falling on something. But those that use nits go up to 500 nits at night, which roughly is equivalent to 0.6 foot candles. So that's just a little more information on that. And staff thinks that if the commission wants to lower the limit to 0.2 foot candles, that would be fine.
And if the commission chose to recommend that to the council, would it be prudent to lower it generally for other types of signage? Because I think that applies to all kinds of signage that are lit, lit electronic display.
Well, there's a separate section that deals with electronic displays. There would be, as proposed, there's a specific limit for digital billboards.
Right.
And then there's other foot candle light trespass limits for all kinds of lighting in other sections of the ordinance. So if you wanted to recommend a lower limit, I would suggest just changing the section 9-6 here.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at 9-4, and it does talk about electronic display illumination, and 0.3 foot candles is specifically mentioned. So that would be something for us to, I think, if we're going to discuss one, we probably should at least discuss the other.
It's possible.
Yes. Anything's possible, Mr. Ings. Now I did a couple of specific questions, clarifications in the language as it stands.
Yep.
First of all, section 9(6)(e)(2). You haven't memorized?
I'm trying. This computer's not
Here, I can.
bringing up this word, but yes, 9(6)(e)(2).
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
this deals with the replacement criteria.
Yes.
So I'm reading these, and first of all, on B, I'm not exactly clear what this means. So if you could kind of, first of all, for every 2 square feet removed, they can put in 1 square foot of digital. It seems to say this pretty much the same thing as the first one. Even though I know the first one is specific to B4, and this one presumably would be everything outside of B4.
Yes, the B is meant to remove clusters of billboards. So if a lot contains a cluster with more than one face, it would, the incentive there would be they only have to remove 2 of those for every 2 square feet of those for every square foot of billboard they want to construct.
So really, the key then in this, am I correct that the key in this is a lot with only one set of back-to-back OASS faces shall not qualify for this provision? And the cumulative area of all faces shall count towards the replacement? In other words, I tried to get, what's the difference between this one and the first one? Is it the fact that you're going to treat clustered billboards kind of as a unit rather than as individual freestanding?
Yeah, so the only difference between this and letter A is that letter A is targeting billboards in B4.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
They seem similar, other than that last bit about 2 billboards on the same pole count as one,
Yeah.
and the thing about cumulative. So, and I have a hard time visualizing what that really means. So that's one. And then, so if the first one counts to B4, the second one counts for lots that have more than one. So I guess number C counts for everything that's not in B4 business district and doesn't have more than one billboard on a lot, right?
Right, that's otherwise.
So this is 3 square feet for one.
Yeah, that's otherwise non-conforming.
And so then, correct. So then what happens so those are for the non-conforming ones
Right,
only?
Yes.
Okay, so now D is anything that's left over.
yes.
All right, I'm sorry. I was like, how does this, I got it now. Yeah.
Yeah, it was difficult to craft the wording, especially for B, to kind of describe. We were talking about a billboard or a property that has 2 faces, but if it only has back-to-back faces, we're not talking about that one. But if the 2 faces are facing the same way, those would count. So
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a better way to just make it a little plainer. I don't know what that would be, but the other one is 3 in that same section. 3D effects, optical illusions, or other technology intended to give the appearance of motion or depth. There's a definition of animation in the ordinance itself. Doesn't mention 3D or such. I don't know if you need to think about adding 3D effects, optical illusions, a definition to the definition section to make it clear. There's a fine line between HD and 3D sometimes.
Yep.
The other thing, I got 2 more quick ones. The other one is a similar point about in item 6 in the same section, malfunctioning digital OASS, default message at lower brightness. I mean, can this be any default message? Just up to the billboard owner?
Yeah, it's not specified in the ordinance.
Do you think that it would be tricky to say it has to say something? I mean, that would be
Yes.
dictating content in a
Yes,
sense.
yeah, that would be.
Okay. Then the final thing is in 11.9C3, electronic sign that is animated or changes display more frequently than allowed by section 9-4 is $50, right? So this, does that not apply to the message boards? I was trying to go through the definitions and just make clear in my mind, like we just allowed in the CRE and school districts, or other message boards around town that display a message, it changes, display another message.
Yes, that's the intent is for that to apply to electronic message boards, which are in section, let's see, 9-4, I think.
Yeah, so
D.
where I'm driving
deals
at
with
in
those.
that is that, and I tried to figure it out. I'm wondering, does this mean that we can find the park district if they're, or try to find the park district?
Yes.
They may not pay the fine, but, or the school district if
Yes.
That, sure,
Yes.
sure. But anyway,
Yeah,
all right, just.
them or Wendy's or Dairy Queen, any of those.
Sure, a private business
Yeah.
is, sort of, goes without saying, but I was wondering about our friends in the governmental community.
Yes.
So, okay. Thank you for clarifying those. Anything further for Mr. Engstrom? Mr. Otto?
One of the things we didn't talk about last time that, in reading some of the studies and so on, that sort of astounded me, because we think of LEDs as producing cool light relative to incandescent. But when you get the massive LEDs on these signboards, it's shocking how much energy they use. So in one study, they say the average U.S. home uses around 11,000 kilowatt hours per year. A 14 by 48 LED billboard at actual reading uses 162,000 kilowatt hours, and some of the other signboards even more. Insofar as in our residential construction, other sort of construction, we have codes which try to mitigate energy consumption. Is there any, and you're looking at this, any way that we can address efficiencies to put incentives then to use the most efficient technologies possible? That's a massive amount of heat in the middle of the summer in one concentrated spot in terms of creating heat islands and so on. And apparently in some areas they actually have to create air conditioning units on the back side of these to cool them, to keep them functioning. Is that something you've run across? Do any of the codes addressing standards and so on for building these things address energy efficiency?
The zoning codes that we've looked at, I have not seen it. I'm not sure if it would fall under the state energy code or not. But something I will say is the technology is evolving, and those studies you saw and that we saw are probably already out of date in terms of the new technology. And perhaps Adams could let us know a little bit more about how much energy the newest units currently consume.
Great. Anything further? Thank you, Mr. Engstrom. All right, if petitioners would like to approach the Plan Commission, and thank you.
Staff is a petitioner.
Oh, staff is petitioner. That's right. That's right. If Adams would like, Adams, our advertising representatives would like to approach.
Good evening.
State your name. That'd be great.
My name is Kane Kaiser. I'm the real estate manager with Adams Outdoor Advertising in Champaign. Our address is 1711 Dobbins Drive in Champaign, 61821. First off, I'd like to thank you all again for continuing this discussion to a topic that's very important to us. One of the main reason we're here is because our clients are asking to be able to utilize this technology. And it's also a great opportunity for us to expand our business in the city of Urbana. The main attraction to digital billboards is being able to buy in a network, which in a network with Champaign currently, where you can buy multiple units, we are also looking for that uniformity from Champaign to Urbana so that people can buy the whole metro area. So that's why we are still asking you to look at a 10-second dwell time. From the Federal Highway Administration, they recommend anywhere between 8 to 10 seconds, and the Illinois Department of Transportation recommends 10 seconds. So on all Illinois state-controlled routes and throughout the Adams as a whole, we maintain 10-second dwell times. In our signs, we do not utilize motion or any type of changing fades, swipes. It's an instantaneous change. One thing the Federal Highway Administration study did point out was that the glances to the billboards are well below the 2-second threshold, which they view as the safety threshold. If you're looking at something for more than 2 seconds while you're driving, that constitutes a possible danger. Another one of the studies that was brought up in the previous meeting was the Swedish study, where they've banned digital billboards. Well, one of the main differences between what the FHWA studied and what they did was, in the Swedish study, the signs were located in the right-of-way itself, which constitutes the drivers looking at the signs more, because when, if you're driving in Chicago or a metropolitan area and you see signs in a roadway, you're more likely to look at them because you obviously think that there's going to be important information, for your exit or something that's going to, accident awareness. So that was one of the main reasons. You almost expect something to be up there that you would need to see to the motoring public if you were, if the sign was actually located in the right-of-way itself. So, yeah, we're on private property. We're outside of the right-of-way, and do no fade swipes, motions, 3D, etc. So next, we're asking for the ability to convert digital signs, or to convert existing signs to digital signs. As you saw with the staff report, that would be very hard for us to currently do, because there's very few areas that we can build where there is actual traffic that would constitute a digital billboard. We are looking for the flexibility because of the leasing arrangements for each property, which they brought up. Technically, we would need a longer-term lease to put the investment in, pay the property owner more as well. They benefit from these leases as well. And then, sign location. We are only going to put these in high-demand areas where the clients are going to want to be. So if we can only build, on the north side of town, north of the interstate, it's probably would not work out for us because the demand just wouldn't be there for the investment. So yeah, we're just focusing on the major traffic corridors. And I do want to address the energy consumption. I know in the original staff report it was somewhere north of $3,000 for a 14x48 that was brought up. We just converted to a newer digital in Champaign, and it would be a very comparable what we would install in Urbana. And our let's see what month this was. I think it was November. Our total electric bill was $141. And the new signs do not utilize the cooling fans or anything like that. It's all air cooled because of how the technology's advanced. So I'd like to ask if there's any further questions for me on that.
Sure. Any questions for Mr. Kaiser? Mr. Trail?
I'm assuming that one of the primary reasons you want to do this is you get substantially more revenue from a digital sign than a regular old billboard.
Well, yeah, you would want to. The return on investment is there for us.
But it must be substantially more to justify these kinds of expenditures and ongoing costs.
If you look at a single location, yes, but you would have to build 4 locations, which would be comparable in cost, the overall cost for a standard billboard to do 4 locations to get those 8 faces that you would for a single digital. It's more efficient. More advertisers get to use that one high traffic location that they would demand, instead of having to pick and choose. Well, if we sold that one out all year, well, they're going to have to choose somewhere else. This gives those opportunities, the client opportunity to be there for more than one client.
But wouldn't you be able to sell an exclusive billboard like that and locking out competitors or anyone else for a substantial amount? Isn't there something about digital signs that makes them more, I guess what I'm trying to get at, isn't the real effect here is that they're more effective at attracting drivers' attention?
It all depends on
long enough to read the message on the sign?
I mean, not necessarily, but there is, depending on who you are. I mean, yes, there's some people do like looking at them better than a standard billboard, but not necessarily drawing your attention more. But the main draw for us is the multiple advertisers making that one location and the return on investment as high as we can, just like any other business would do.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Kaiser? Mr. Hopkins?
Did the staff produced maps showing buffers at 500 and 200? And I'm wondering whether there's any clues in that about what what locations would work or not work. As I recall from last meeting, you were particularly concerned about the 1,000 buffer distance between signs and whether it would allow any of this to work.
Right.
So I'm looking for whether we know anything more than we did a month ago.
Well, I mean, the 1,000-foot buffer district for us would be very difficult for us to build anything, especially on University Avenue, Cunningham Avenue, where the traffic would be. So that's why we were asking to convert existing signage which are already located in the proper zoning districts, but because of the buffer, most of them are legal non-conforming.
But if you have to, if they're non-conforming, it's 2-to-1 ratio?
Just depends on the district that they're taken out of.
It's 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, I mean, it depends a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're taking 2 others out, is it not possible to find any locations that you have that you can make conforming by taking others away that would?
You know, we haven't been able to look into that 100%. You know, I'd like to be able to see some of the mapping technologies and how those shrink. But
Well, it seems to me that becomes a key question of whether you can actually do it now with 1,000 feet.
right, yeah.
And if you can't, what's
Well,
the
it
difference?
comes down to a return on investment as well, as we were just discussing. You know, if we find a location that we really want and we keep that 1,000-foot buffer and we have to take down, 10 sign faces, that's not gonna be a good return on investment. We'd be negative on the amount of sign faces that we have.
I understand. I'm a little surprised that we don't have a better picture, or that you don't have a better picture of what you could actually do. But, okay.
Mr. Storr?
Adams wants 10-second dwell time, and the city is considering 3 minutes. That's quite a big difference. Is there any middle ground there, or is this a potential deal breaker, or what?
As far as the company is concerned, that hasn't been a huge in-depth discussion, but I mean, the 10-second seems to be one of the most important aspects of being able to complete a network and be able to sell the digital as we currently are. A 3-minute dwell time almost makes it a static, because most people aren't going to want to wait 3 minutes for their ad to come up. And across the company, we sell for 8 advertisers, so every 80 seconds you come around, and it would be every 24 minutes if it was a 3-minute dwell time.
Anything further? No? All right, thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Kaiser.
much. Thanks, guys.
Anybody else want to address the Plan Commission on this case? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was trying to figure it out, I think. I'd like to. Mr. Roberts?
Hey, hi.
You state your name for the people on television?
Yes, Dennis Roberts. I come here as a citizen interested in the question. I didn't actually download or look at the docket, today's docket, so I'm kind of not thoroughly prepared maybe to talk about some of the issues. I did give you a 2-page memo that I prepared last time, raising some questions that I thought should be looked at by the commission, and I hope you've had a chance to think about them. Having heard the conversation so far in the presentation, I'm somewhat encouraged. I think that as a home rule community, we really do have to consider we have the ability to choose whether to go along with this proposal or not, we don't have to adopt a new ordinance or allow digital signs yet in the community if we don't choose to. And I think there's some question that I think the need to, or the ability to actually deliver a package that might be interesting or suit the outdoor ad company may not be that package which is really more in harmony with the nature of this community, its values, and its core interests in environment, aesthetics, and quality of life. So I have some recommendations just to comment on. I really like the direction of some of the conversation. Mr. Otto and Mr. Trail have thoughtful questions about just the veracity of going in this direction, and I really appreciate their concern. Yes, it is a possible question that no action might be the best action, and just let it be at this time. And kind of what I would say is just say no, just say no. At this time, no. Whatever ordinance we do adopt should address all of the concerns that come up in this discussion, and it should be tailored to the needs of this community and not any other, because this is the community that this is where the signs could be placed, and this is the community in which we live. And if we're a little different than other people, well, we are. And I think we're known to be a little different than every other community in this area. So fine, let's be ourselves. That's what they call is being authentic. We're not trying to mimic or be other people. Urbana is authentic, and we have our own standards and thoughts about our environment and our visual urban environment. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness in contemplating that truth as we look at the details of what might or might not be accepted here. For my personal frame of mind, I would say, if we're proposing to have a 1,000-foot buffer zone around signs in our community, why bother to look at lower limits of buffer zones? Why don't we just stick with the levels that we have right now? Let's be continuous and have the same concerns and the same respect for the community and the streetscape, and not diminish those. I would certainly not want to finalize this ordinance without knowing very clearly, tit for tat, what might be reduced or what might be removed if digital signs were allowed. What is the trade-off? Do we know what is the real bargain that we're agreeing to here? It never occurred to me, I hadn't heard that Adams actually owns property in Urbana. I thought that all the signs were on leased property or rented property. So I'd like to really know more about how much property is actually owned upon which some of our signs rest. Because, I don't know if they own property, I guess they're paying property taxes. And that's pretty much the only income I've heard is being generated for the city itself by allowing these billboards. So the other financial generation that could be of benefit to the city is basically the installation fees, or what you're calling as a lease fee per year. And I really like the comment that for the amount of money that's being generated per sign that might be erected, which increases with the traffic flow as far as value to the customer who's purchasing advertising, those rates can go up very high. There can be tens of thousands of dollars per month earned by these signs. So that's in the literature. So it may be that Rockford only has a fee of $550 a year, and that maybe Chicago only offers $400. But maybe in Urbana, because we value the quality of life here more, we have really the right as a home rule city to require and ask whatever fee we really feel we is equal to the intrusion of erecting a new billboard that distracts drivers or may otherwise, change the quality of life here. If we want to allow that to happen, let Adams pay for that privilege. And who cares what other people choose to pay? Maybe we'll set a standard. Maybe our standards are different. I think if they are erected, reducing the illumination per Bill Brown's letter is an extremely valid comment. And if you go past the illuminated billboards, the digital billboards that are on Neal Street and other places in the community, that on University there's one, near Brookins Center, not Brookins Center, it's Beckman Center. In weather like this, where it's a little bit overcast, the glow is considerable. As a matter of fact, it will be the brightest thing on the street. So when we say that Sweden's decision to ban billboards was not the same because their billboards are closer to the right-of-way, it doesn't diminish how bright they are and the effect on the driver for distraction. And it's been proven that young people who are tech savvy in so many different ways, and they're constantly looking at their iPhones and their apps, are going to be more swayed to distraction than other communities. And it's been proven that anything that's a 2-second distraction might be enough to begin being a public danger, and that a lot of times it takes 4 seconds to read a billboard, especially if there's lettering on it. So the public safety aspect of a billboard that's changing every 10 seconds becomes significant. I think that if we're going to allow these billboards to be put up, the 3-minute rule, which we already have applying for digitalized signs and message boards, should apply to this as well. A friend of mine said, 3 minutes? I don't care if they change in 3 years. I won't say that we're going to go that way, but I think that's a sign. I think that's a comment that digital billboards aren't necessarily that person's choice. There's probably some other things that I could bring up. For example, and I'm going to hold a public forum myself on the question of digital billboards. I'll be at the public library probably next week. I hope that you will. I just want to say that I think there needs to be truly a public discussion about the arrival of digital billboards in our community, and I can't see that it's happening here because there's just myself here. So I don't think this is like public input to the level that you guys need. So one of the things that I found out in my research, and I've looked at the Adams Outdoor Organization's information on their website pretty thoroughly, is that this is just something that I think that ought to be looked at a little bit. I think that the ordinance language text that they offered to the city as their standard included the fact that there was going to be some discretion about the billboards that would be acceptable and messages, because it's important to be sensitive to the community. And I like to say that probably that was originated because in Charlottesville, South Carolina, in 2012, one of the local organizations posted a billboard, several billboards in the community, and the public outcry that they didn't like the message that was on the billboard made Adams decide to withdraw the billboards and take them down. So we have an instance here where the company uses the First Amendment rights of free speech to support, the need for allowing billboards in the community, and yet it's interested in being able to choose which messages might be too sensitive for the community to bear. The group that wished to have their billboards placed in Charlottesville and then were removed was the American Atheist Society. So these people didn't believe in Christ or God. and their billboard said so. And this upset some of the people in the community, and all of a sudden, I would say it was an example of censorship. And it was agreed upon by the AOA, American Outdoor Advertising. And this is at their website if you look under their news for Charlottesville, South Carolina. So I'm not saying that it would ever happen here, but that language that we could potentially censor community speech in billboard posting is in our ordinance, and I would recommend that that not be part of our ordinance. So ultimately, I think that this commission might not be ready to finalize things tonight by a vote, and I kind of encourage you to leave this open. And at that, I will say thank you for the public input opportunity.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts? Mr. Otto?
I gather from your comments, I mean, you would be happy if many or all of the billboards currently in town disappeared.
If I could be Vermont, and if we had been smart enough to move before the American Highway Beautification Bill became a law, we would not have billboards. There are 3 states in the union that don't.
So given that that's not going to happen, at least not in my lifetime and yours,
That's right.
if an ordinance could be crafted that reduced the number of billboards and allowed digital, but with such restrictions on lighting and so on, so that visually they were not significantly more distracting or more ugly than what's currently there, what would the trade-off be for you before you would say, I think that that would be in the public interest to allow it digital if we could get rid of 2, 3, 4, where do you say
Well, it would
as a
have-
way of reducing?
It would have to be more than 2. It would have to be more than 4. Actually, I think that the trade-off, and you're doing this trade-off as 1 square foot to 1 square foot, or maybe that becomes 1 face to 1 face, is pretty cheap.
Well, we don't have that. We have more than that. That it's 2 for 1, 3 for 1, or 4 for 1.
Right. Well, okay. So I mean, but really, the question is, which one is more likely to happen? I mean, I think Champaign thought they were getting that kind of a thing, and they ended up with 1 for 1. So I mean, we have to kind of think about really maybe exactly what we are going to get. I don't know. I think that the public.
I guess my question is:
public
is
can
it worth
decide
it
that.
to you? Is it absolutely out of the question in your personal opinion, or would you say, okay, I could see doing this in exchange for X?
Well, that's a good compromise, maybe. But I really don't like digital billboards. I think that they're more intrusive than other kinds of things, other kinds of billboards. I really don't mind normal billboards, actually. And some people say, the 3 billboards at the curve on Fowler Road, down there near Florida, really distracts them. To me, they're almost like iconic Americana, and it doesn't bother me in the least.
Okay.
But my eye isn't constantly being drawn to them. They have become in a way part of the landscape, and I don't mind billboards. They serve a purpose. I'm interested in finding out, if there's gas coming up, or if there's going to be a restaurant, at the next town. These things are important to me too. It's the digitalization. It's the fact that they draw more attention, and they're meant to. They're designed to. I mean, that's why they're so popular, and that's why I can understand totally why Adams Outdoor would like to have probably as many conversions as possible. And I'm wondering if, once we let a few in, will we find that more and more pressure will be placed upon future city councils or future commissions, because will come. Eventually, this will be technology requires. This is what technology requires. So, my feeling personally is just to let one in is to basically give up the city's inalienable right to choose its environmental quality of life, because you might have one in a place that you don't care about it, but maybe in 10, 15 years, housing developments will be on that property, which is now vacant, and those people may have opinions about it. In other words, it's a responsibility of the city, the community, to do what is best for the community. what is the best for this community, not what is convenient for, industry, factories, monopolies. Adams is a monopoly, and they have no. So I mean, that's my answer. I tend to be. I kind of draw the line. I think this is the turning point. If you're ever gonna have a limitation, this is where the dam will break. The first one that goes on up, because that's your precedent. You've already allowed it once. You could never take it down. They'll never request it to come down. Think about, I think that's a really important decision. I think it's kind of a moral decision almost. And it may not suit staff, but it suits me.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Hopkins?
Can you point me to a section where the discretion on content language is?
In the ordinance that they provided to staff, and it had red copy in it, it was one of the last paragraphs. It was
But
in
it's
one of the
not
last
in our
paragraphs.
proposed
This
ordinance.
the, are you talking about, there was an ordinance drafted by Adams that was provided to the city council?
Yeah.
And we were, at one point, we were provided a copy of that. So in our research, that was some information, but this ordinance was drafted by our staff based on our research. So,
So it doesn't exist in this ordinance?
no, it's not being.
Okay, well, that's great. because-
So it's not in the language of the ordinance we're considering.
Correct.
Okay, well, good. That's one problem taken care of.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Would you like anything, okay, just come up here and don't have to state your name again. If you could just address any of those
I just want
topics.
to clarify one thing. Champaign is still a 2-for-1. It's a 2-for-1 takedown for digital, not a 1-for-1.
Feet,
It's face for face.
face for face.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was
Great.
it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll close the public input portion of this hearing and throw it open for discussion among the plan commissioners. Anybody have any thoughts or directions, further directions for city staff, et cetera? Mr. Trail, he barely beat you, Ms. Bynum. Ms. Bynum.
Just a quick comment. From what they were saying about the dwell time, I personally think a 10-second dwell time would be too short. I think it should be longer than 10 seconds. And there was another comment too that I had, but it escapes me right now, so I'll come back to it later.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Trail.
I'm not a great fan of billboards in general, probably less so than. The root of a lot of my concern with this is that right now, we're not allowing any. And by starting to allow them, we're opening up a whole area. I know we're trying to do some things based on limiting technology and things like that. But things are going to move very rapidly. And part of the reason why I was asking about one thing that makes these attractive is they do attract people's attention. So once you go down this path, they're going to be able to innovate probably faster than we're going to be able to. It's like you're letting the camel's nose in under the tent, and the whole camel's going to get in pretty soon. We may think we're getting something. I'm particularly concerned about the 10-second dwell time. I'm also particularly concerned about pedestrian safety, and I really don't think, because so many of the studies are so obviously industry funded, it's pretty difficult to tell. I mean, when all of us go and look, if you put a regular billboard next to even a low light digital billboard, the digital one is substantially brighter. I mean, there's just no arguing with that, really. Is it too bright or bright enough to cause more of a whatever? Clearly the advertising industry feels that it catches more attention and is so almost by definition more distracting. The other problem is that once it's in, it's a base for continued innovation. Let's take, for an example, and I think this could probably be done today, and it's already appeared in movies. You add a license plate scanner to it, and an ad that comes up in their 8 ad cycle has your name on it. You happen to be the first one sitting in line, and it read your license plate, and it has your name when it comes up. It's going to get your attention. Would they be in violation of anything in this ordinance, or wouldn't that we now we can't limit them because that's content, and that would be an infringement on their freedom of speech? I'm just saying these are once you let them in, yes, the flexibility that lets them change the message very often, and also obviously gain a lot of additional revenue, again, because I believe it's much more effective at distracting drivers from the road into reading their message. I think the current situation works fine, and I also think that over time, I think they're probably going to simply abandon the current old-style billboards over time. I think maybe more rapidly than we may think. All right.
Any further comments or follow-up? Mr. Buttrey.
I was initially in favor of this as a way to sort of expedite the removal of non-conforming billboard usage. After hearing, that being said, with reductions in illumination and a dwell time of longer than 10 seconds, probably 3 minutes, after listening to Mr. Kaiser speak, I'm really not sure that it's going to be an effective way of removing them as I had hoped. I'm just kind of wondering about the legality of other potential ways of doing that. I don't know if we as a home rule state have some way of beginning like an amortization process where we could remove it based on the structure itself, unrelated to the content. I don't know. I guess that's something that I would want city staff to explore.
Great. Jeff, do you want to?
Yeah. So in our past dealings with billboard companies, we have tried to work on amortization, and that's been found basically to not be allowed by court actions. So that's not a road that we can pursue.
So I think that in the past, if I could, the road that we did pursue, the council approved, was to limit them based on zoning class and to specific high-density corridors, which, as Mr. Trail has pointed out, eventually will reduce the number by some factor. I think Mr. Hopkins was going to back to.
I just, I remember at the last meeting, we talked about how the previous amendments for non-digital billboards were really crafted over a long period of time and were satisfactory to Adams, and it was basically a settled amendment and the best deal for both parties. So I would hope that this discussion doesn't get into some of those underlying regulations, in particular the buffer distance. It's very important to the city, and it was acceptable to Adams to have the 1,000 feet buffer and also to limit to those corridors. So we provided the interactive map that wasn't to suggest that we want to revisit buffer distances for billboards. That would be a completely different undertaking, and I know we talked about that a little bit last time, so I thought I'd just throw that in there at this point.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Hopkins?
So, 2 comments, I guess, and then a suggestion. On the buffer distance, what I was really trying to get at was to figure out what was possible for them, given that they were going to have to remove some, and whether there were places they could put them where we would want them. And I think we still don't know the answer to that, though my casual observation suggests that there are such places under the current wording of the ordinance. So you want to answer that one, because the others are different.
If I may, yeah, we talked about some locations, and Adams is here, and I think one example was Lincoln and University. And because that's a cluster, under this list, it would be, you would think that you could take 2 of those billboards and replace with 1 digital. However, because of the buffer distance, it would actually be removing all 8 at that intersection to get the 1 digital.
Which shows
is
us
that-
3.
Is it
Yeah, there's, I think, 6 total faces there.
There's
6?
6
Okay, I
faces.
misremembered. There's
So they-
4 on the northwest and 2 on the northeast. So in that case, the actual, under the text amendment as it's currently proposed, and that is an intersection they're interested in, it
Yeah.
would take, you'd actually have to remove the 6, and they'd have to work with,
But
Carl
they're
and-
non-conforming because of distance. So they only need 2 to 1. So they remove 2 of them, and they convert the remaining 1 to digital. Now, at this point, I don't want to actually get into whether the specifics work, but if I understand the way the ordinance works, no? Why-
No, they,
you try.
yes, any new digital billboard would have to be conforming to zoning standards, and that would include not being within 1,000 feet of existing billboards. So,
But in order to put up a digital billboard, they have to remove, if it's conforming, non-conforming, at 2 to 1 ratio. Am I correct?
yeah, for the clusters, yes, they would have to
Otherwise,
remove
yeah,
at
it's a
least
cluster.
2 to put up 1. Yes, they would have to remove at least 2 to put up the 1 face, but they would still have to clear the hurdle of being within 1,000 feet of other
Okay.
billboards.
If they remove 4 to put up 2 faces, which they can do back to back, am I correct?
Oh, correct.
All right? Then there will be no non-conforming because all the others within 1,000 feet will have been removed.
True.
Okay,
Yes.
so I do understand how the ordinance
Okay.
works.
Yep, yep.
And I can find at least 3 places where they could quickly do that. And those are 3 places on places I can imagine they might want to do that.
Any of the dark blue, they can do that just with these, just with these replacement.
I,
So you've
that
got
I
yeah,
understand.
just so,
And
and
there's-
for anybody else, and then for the
as-
others, you have to move some dots, you can get the buffers cleared up.
Right. It's pretty easy to find places by eliminating strategic dots, you can get the space. Okay, so, my point in bringing that up is, I don't think the ordinance makes it difficult for them to actually find viable places to put them, the ordinance as it's written. So a second comment. I actually have the same reaction as Dennis Roberts to the ones on Philo Road. In fact, I find it ironic that we're not even talking about them. They're not on our maps. They're not, because they're so non-conforming that we don't want them, but they're my favorite billboards in town. Not that I want them to go digital, but it's nostalgia. Anyway, that's the way billboards should be. There's this piece of property there that has no other useful function. So that's sort of a prelude to saying, I am probably less worried about getting rid of our existing billboards than some people are. So that's a basis for a suggestion that we, that the action we might take on this is to table it indefinitely. And what I mean by that is not send it to the city council with a recommendation for approval, but I don't mean to send it to the city council with a recommendation not to approve, okay? I think we should say, for a whole bunch of reasons that have been articulated, that this is not the time, given the state of the technology, the state of what we know, to make a change in our ordinance to.
So our options are right now only to send it, I think, I was just going to see the staff.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Right now, I think our options, so are you saying you think you might want us to continue it until some unspecified future date?
So my objective is to send the message that we're not ready to move this forward. So if the only way we can do that is to send it to city council with a recommendation not to approve.
That's one way to do it.
Maybe that's what we should do. But I think the message I would like to send is more along what Mr. Trail was saying, that this just seems like the wrong time to do this.
May I-
Ms. Tyler?
You know, this case is before you because of council direction to the staff. And if you look at section 11-7 on amendments, it gives you procedures on how you can do amendments to the zoning ordinance. And there is a requirement here that within a reasonable time after the close of the public hearing, the Plan Commission shall make a report to the City Council, including a recommendation for or against the proposed amendment. So, you know, and I don't think in practice, I don't think it's, Plan Commission's there to recommend to the council and to say, well, we're just going to hold this. We're not going to bring it forward. That's loses our balance of power that we have. It would be like the staff saying, well, you know, we're not going to bring that forward because we don't agree with it. I think it's.
So you're saying
I think we should
behave like a rules
respect-
committee in a.
Well, I think
Sorry.
we should respect that we've been requested to do this
Okay.
research and do this review. And, you know, you're perfectly free, and I think you've held a very good hearing and procedures and great discussion. And so there's lots of different directions you can go, but I think by our ordinance, you do need, in that reasonable time, to make a report to the city council. So I think that's under our ordinance, but I also think it's the right thing to do. So I would encourage you to, you know, rather than table it or, you know, to make the changes or, you know, recommend denial or, you know, whatever it is. We've got great minutes. We've had great discussion. There's a variety of opinions. So that's a good democratic process.
Mr. Otto?
I've got a comment and a question for staff. I still have, good reason to continue the hearing because there are unanswered questions that I think need to be resolved before I could take a position. And one of the interesting things that Dennis Roberts raised was the First Amendment issues, and the city attorney has addressed that several times in his concern that fines or fees not be too high because it could violate constitutional rights to free expression. I would like city attorney to come back with information on whether we can craft language that guarantees open access, that they cannot deny someone who's willing to pay their standard fee access to the billboard because they don't like the message. It could be because of politics, religion, or
Talking about almost like net neutrality.
what can be done. So I would like the city attorney to tell us what we can do to guarantee that, and I've heard sometimes businesses who advertise a lot, can stipulate, we don't want a competitor. We're going to buy this block of time in exchange for you not allowing someone to. So I'd like to know what sorts of things we can do there without crossing the line.
Can I ask you a quick question?
This-
What is it you think on that issue is different between an electronic billboard and a regular billboard or any other kind of public
We cannot go
display?
back and revisit the standard billboard bylaws. That's been litigated, it's been resolved. The industry is very litigious. We've got one chance. We cannot tighten up anything on this. After we approve this, any attempt, if we try to reduce the nits, they can say, that's a loss of revenue, you have to pay us for it. So we have to take our time, and we have to continue this hearing, because we will not get another chance to do anything that could be interpreted as losing revenue, because the national industry will come and crush us.
Thanks.
I-
Now I understand.
Okay, I agree that we need to send it with a recommendation when we're ready to send it with a recommendation. The only reason I would want to continue it is if we can continue to try to come to an agreement. And so what maybe I can do here is run through some of these things and just kind of do a straw poll, some of the issues that have come up and whether they need to be addressed or you know, how important they are to you. One is the issue that that I think is still somewhat is the issue of closeness to intersections, and I'm just going to take them in order of the staff memo. These were the issues from last time, and I think there's a couple more.
So what are you asking? Are you asking whether we want the staff to get more information on these topics?
No, I'm trying to drive us toward consensus one way or the other.
Sir, you're asking, is there anything that we are actually in agreement on when we don't know it yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Even if it's you agree that you don't like it. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know. So there was a question raised about whether this ordinance should have some special limitation or setbacks from intersections. Does anybody feel strongly that if that's not changed, and staff recommendation right now is not to do that, is that a deal breaker?
So staff recommendation is to not have any special rules for
I'm still unresolved on
intersection?
the issue, so I would not be willing to approve it without something. I'm not saying it has to have something.
Okay.
I'm still trying to sort
You're still
it out.
trying to figure it out. Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
I have a
Mr.
basic
Chair.
problem with it just because even the studies that have been cited, however they're funded or whatever, almost all seem to be aimed at highways. And there seems to be very little that's been aimed at whether those same levels of lighting are also apply in denser urban areas with pedestrians and people coming in across streets and all that sort of thing. So I just, to me, even if you accept the studies, they only argue for, you know, that certain level of lighting is safe on the interstate. But it doesn't necessarily tell you much what might be safe at University of Lincoln.
Did you want to say something, Mr. Hopkins?
Yeah, I think since we haven't looked carefully at what the outcomes of the ordinance could be in sign location and density, that all of the buffer, intersection, all of that has to be investigated.
So you're saying rather than continue through this, you would rather just get some simulations?
Well, at least for the set of topics that are related to the specifics of locations of buffers, intersections, the pedestrian crossing question.
Well, are you saying that, and I would share if this is what you're saying, is we have a set of, you know, buffers and, you know, setbacks and things, and what's the practical, how many billboards could you electronic billboards could you actually fit in Urbana and conform to all the rules?
And
I would love to know that.
Where could they be?
And where would they have to be in order to do that?
That's good. That's great.
I
Mr. Storr?
saying, I think Lou's expressed my
We'd all like to know that, yeah. Okay, that's good. Fines and fees. $100 fine. Is that too low?
I think it's too low.
I think it is too. It's not a deterrent to behavior.
Generating,
This is the fine part.
I understand
Yeah,
that. I don't think it would hurt very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an effective-
Mr. Hopkins?
I don't understand why our fees that do apply per day don't say so.
That, wording change, yeah.
Because if you think of it as $100 a day, and somebody puts up a sign that we determine is animated, and they thought it wasn't animated, and nobody catches it for 5 days, and we know it's been up for 5 days, the fine is not $100, it's $500. And if it takes you 2 days to take it down, or you got to negotiate with your advertiser, but whatever.
No, I agree, yeah.
I'm not sure whether the fine is too big or too small.
But it is a per day fine.
I think it's worded in a way that does not convey what the actual fine is.
We can look at clarifying that. Usually, the fines begin to accrue from the point of notice, not necessarily from the point of violation, but from the point of notice. That's
When
more
somebody
So
defensible.
that
breaks the
matters
complaint.
as well.
It does.
In other words, I don't think the fine statement in the ordinance is precise enough for either us to know what it means, and therefore probably not for the
That's a
potential
point well taken.
violator to know what it means.
Mr. Otto?
Another thing would need to be clarified is if they're doing a cycle, and they've got a cycle of 10 companies advertising on a given day, and 3 of them are in violation, is that 3 violations, or is that 1 violation?
Another.
Anyway,
I mean,
the
Okay,
fines.
that language really
Needs to be
needs,
specific.
that
Yeah.
language needs to be clarified.
So that Adams or whomever will know exactly what the consequences are.
They need to know exactly what the
Absolutely.
consequences are.
Exactly. Okay, that's fines. Fees. Should there be some sort of lease fee, annual maintenance fee, whatever you want to call it?
I think so.
Yes.
This is, Earl,
I would say now, that the fee should also have be computed in some way that it can at least partially pay for whatever staff time is needed to observe and see
Sure, enforcement,
that,
yeah.
see that the signs are in conformance.
So I was a little confused about the memo about whether you want us to take a stance on fees or whether we should make some kind of vague recommendation that the council then picks up.
I think a good way to handle that would be when we do the council report, that there would be, Plan Commission recommended amendment, and then a separate recommendation that the city council adopt a
Change the fees.
license or a fee, as part of their, as part of a separate action, separate ordinance.
Sure.
Yeah, because it's not, strictly speaking, a zoning item. It would be a
Right,
separate
right.
ordinance for them, but there's no reason why the Plan Commission couldn't make that recommendation.
Okay.
I have another question from
Mr.
staff.
Otto?
Insofar, to build a sign, even though it's not real property, they would have to come get a building permit, right?
Correct.
I believe that's.
And so, normally, in real property, if someone is building a $500,000 house, the fees for that are commensurate with the square footage and cost of the house compared to one that's less, right?
Yes.
So could the fee be constructed as a % of the construction costs?
The annual fee?
No, the
Talking about the
construction
building
fee.
Construction, yeah, the
When
building
they-
permit fee is dependent on the construction cost.
It would be on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Good clarification. Okay, buffers. And I know that we didn't, maybe we want to wait on that one to get the lay of the land before we decide if it's high enough. Okay, the free speech issue, we're going to get clarification from city attorney before we even, I think, go down that road. If he says, no way, there's no point in, I don't think, dwelling on it. Is there anything else that I've forgotten?
If I understood Mr. Otto's point, it's sort of the reverse.
It is.
of the usual question.
It is.
We want to assure open access.
Right, correct,
Not, we're trying to restrict what
correct.
a billboard company can put on.
Could we have an open access or content neutrality provision as part of the ordinance? Something like
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
and/or in what ways do we have
Okay, is
recourse
the-
on that issue? Maybe through other means,
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure,
But I would agree that's pretty important.
yeah, that's a good point. Mr. Trail?
I'm specific of this free speech issue. Let's suppose a scenario where they have several ads running, and two of the ads have predominantly white backgrounds, and that
Yeah.
we determine for whatever reason that those two
Oh, yeah.
cause it to be in violation of the illumination ordinance, but not the others. Does that become a free speech issue?
I don't know. But first of all, I would say on that one, define white. I mean, there's certain people, for example, with snow, they have many, many different words for different kinds of snow, and my wife has about that many words for different kinds of white. And, you know, I got like
Well,
one,
uh,
which
An
dark
ad-
white, light white.
An ad with a white, with a very light colored background as opposed to one with a very dark colored background.
Sure, but that's the kind of thing that I worry about with that, is enforceability. What color is that? I mean,
Well, I
Isn't
think
that
we're all
covered-
thinking of
isn't
the
that-
idea that, well, you know, if you have a billboard, you know, there's only so much light that reflects off it regardless of whether it's a
Sure,
light colored
sure.
billboard or a dark colored. But, you know, especially, I have a feeling, more and more of these, they're, you know,
Do-
they may for these be narrowing the focus, they may be able to focus these in specific, they may appear, so if a particular ad, for whatever reason, only one among them pushes it over while that ad is being displayed, do they get to say, well, our average illumination across this amount of time is within the limit? Or, you know, if we say, well, you have to take the one ad out, is that we're discriminating against that what ad because of its content? I mean,
I don't know about that.
We've been in discussions with Adams on how to calibrate and make sure they're not violating the light level limits. And the way we would test that is have them display an all-white screen. So that's the brightest possible. And that would be when we would test it. So it wouldn't be tied to any particular ad. It would just be what's the brightest that the billboard is capable of with the settings.
I think to answer all these questions on violations, you know, there's a sign, it's one billboard, and whether it's one of the ads, it's too bright or on too light, it doesn't matter, it's in violation. We don't piece it out. So it's a physical sign, we have physical development regulations, so we're not going to sift through them to that matter, to that extent. Either it's in violation or not. And this is the type, I mean, enforcement is not easy, but when something's in violation, you know it, and when it's defensible, we will be able to enforce against it and to defend that. So, I don't know if that helps, but it's not. I don't think we don't need to say, oh, well, you know, you were out of compliance 50% of the time. I mean, you're out of compliance, and this is a fine. But honestly, I think that this company will comply and be responsive because that's the way that they've been. I think that will not be a super issue for the billboards, but we'll definitely monitor.
That doesn't seem like a great argument for a particular regulation because they're good guys, they won't violate it.
You know, I'm just saying, this is how things are enforced. We don't piece it apart the way it's not that complicated. We don't piece it apart. Either it's in violation of the regulation or not. So, you know, it's like being a little bit pregnant or something, so.
Great. Anything further on that? So I'm trying to run down all these issues and then give a summary. I think the one we haven't hit yet is hold time. 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Mr. Otto.
To respond to that, I would have to,
Oh, yeah, jump backwards.
is it allowed and feasible for us to have a study session and get us all in a city van with your light meter and go to some existing signs, several of them, and
Have to
watch the
take
whole
public
time?
with us.
I don't know what, and have the light meter and this thing scroll across, tell us, this is the reading I'm getting on this is the reading I'm getting on this. I understand now that I haven't gone around to study signs myself.
Actually, that's an interesting point because.
But is there any way for us to, see what we're talking about in real space and go to university and go to Neil and as a group with the light detection device and tell the city, tell the public, we're going to be here at 7:10 and we're going to be here at 7:20.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be
right,
really
right.
helpful for me to actually look at a sign and say,
Sure.
We-
This is what
We
we're-
need to,
I don't want to,
we need to get back to you on that because it is difficult to do field trips with open meetings.
Yeah.
We are able to do that with our council. We have to notify the public. But I think something like this where it's at night and I don't know that we can do that and meet the Open Meetings Act. We will ask our attorney, can we do that with small groups of plan commissioners? Would that be permissible? I mean, this is not only do we have Open Meetings Act requirements for this case, but we're also, it's a zoning case, and we're in the middle of a hearing, so everything is evidenced, so everything needs to be accessible to the public.
yeah.
And it's great that we have it televised, and we have minutes, and everybody gets to hear the evidentiary record that we're building right now. And if we go out and do this field exercise as a group, it's really going to be hard to maintain. But let us think about this and find a way that we can get folks educated on exactly what that means. That's an excellent suggestion, but we have to find out how to do that, given the constraints of open meetings and our zoning hearing that's underway.
I would find that really helpful.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you guys, but I think last time, and maybe you remember, when we passed the ordinance, the one that's here now, a few years ago, I think Robert Myers at that time went around and took several readings of several signs so that we could get some idea of exactly how many foot candles or nits these different kinds of signs were putting out. And I remember him taking one of the giant one by the Assembly Hall, I think, and maybe some other ones. If you could maybe dig back in there and see if short of an actual, demonstration or roadshow or whatever, if we could find out what was done before, because I think I remember that.
Maybe we get that ahead of the meeting so we could go. out
Exactly.
to our own-
You just had a list, if the city was going to measure this, using the enforcement standards they were going to, proposing to use, measure it, and then you tell us the conditions under it, and then we can go look.
The problem, though, is every ad is going to have a different reading. because
On the
depend-
digital ones, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why going there and watching a cycle of ads scroll by would be I guess they're on 10 seconds. That would really tell me a lot.
Yeah. Mr. Hopkins?
So if I just heard this correctly, though, that won't tell us what the regulation effect is going to be, because the regulation effect is based on an all-white sign.
I thought that's what he said.
Yeah, right.
So let me pose a question, but I'm sort of hoping that I'm stating what we could do. If Champagne's sign ordinance has the same 3-foot candles, or if we know what it is, if it's not 3-foot candles, if they use the same enforcement technique, then if any one of us, or if it set up a field trip, all of us, were to look at Champagne signs we would have an indication that those would be legal under the ordinances written. Now,
Yeah,
I don't know
ask-
whether Champaign enforces anything like the same way, so I don't know if that works or not.
Yeah, I want us to be careful with that one, so talking to the attorney about it. I mean, as individuals uncoordinated, we often drive out to sites and it's encouraged and things of that nature.
But if at a meeting,
If we could get some testimony.
somebody
yeah.
could say that, okay, Champagne's ordinance has these rules
Yeah,
and
we
these
can,
procedures.
I think that's a good a good suggestion, that we get some measurements from Champaign or other locations, and then individually, you can go and do experience
I
it
guess part of what I
yourself.
was saying is, the reason I'm saying that is, if we went out and did it as a field trip, we could not take the measurements, because we would not have control over the signs. We couldn't suddenly say to the sign, okay,
Turn it
go
white.
all white.
Right.
Good
And I
point.
don't think the city's gonna buy an eighth of, and 10-second interval on the signs to go white at the time we each want to go there.
Interesting concept.
But we might, we might even get a donation.
Yeah. So, okay, so that gets to illumination, and I think the last one is hold time, and that we haven't really tried to gauge ourselves. So we're between 10 minutes and 10 seconds and 3 minutes. Is everybody comfortable with 3 minutes, or do we need to start to move towards 10 seconds?
I don't know.
It depends on,
I'm
not ready to.
Longer. I don't know that it would have to. The 110-second thing was used as well. 3 minutes is more than, so 180 seconds is more
Intersection,
than 110
yeah.
seconds. But suppose you sit through the light once, for whatever reason.
it happens.
Yes, so now you're up to 220 seconds, which is now more than 180 seconds. So to me, 3 minutes sounds minimal. 10? All I'm saying is I'm not sure that we've applied the right criteria yet to know. I'm certainly not happy with 10 seconds. I think other people have expressed that they're not happy with 10. I don't know that we have a consensus for how long would be enough, but I'm not necessarily much more comfortable with 3 than 10 seconds.
I think I'm way more comfortable with 3 minutes than 10 seconds. You know, I don't think they need to be 10 minutes apart for the advertisements, but at least a minute apart, I would say. But 10 seconds is too short for me.
Any other thoughts on hold time? All right, well, let me try to summarize. Buffers and intersections, we need further info and scenarios regarding what's possible. And, let's look at the 1,000-foot first and maybe concentrate on that one.
Meaning what's possible, given the 1,000
Correct,
foot.
correct.
Because that's the one that seems to matter, as far
That's,
as I can
at
tell.
least it's right now, because that's what the ordinance says. The fines, we need to specify that, make the language clearer about that they are per day, and specify what constitutes a violation, I think. And then I think there might be a consensus, depending on that we might want to have them be a little higher. But it's probably contingent on cleaning up the language and really thinking about it, I think. Fees, we think that there probably should be some kind of an annual fee based on, that is commensurate for I guess, the right and privilege to use digital billboards in Urbana.
Well,
It's appropriate.
Commensurate with the staff need for enforcement.
Sure, that's good, that's a good point.
This is
To defray cost of enforcement, that's a good point.
exactly right.
Open access, we need some legal opinion on whether we have any room to do anything in that area. Hold time, no consensus. We'll have to just fight that one out when the time comes. We'll save it to last.
Okay, you want to do any discussion on it now, or?
I think we kind of just did, and
Okay.
Mr. Otto doesn't know. Mr. Trail wants to go up. Ms. Bynum sounded like maybe someplace in the middle. That's a spread right there.
Okay.
It's not like we could dial that right in.
And a lot of it's just based on kind of what we think. I mean,
Sure,
there isn't
sure.
a lot of evidence to, you know, to any of it, which
Yeah.
concerns me.
Sure, I understand. There's a lot of studies and not, you know, it's hard to make out, you know. Roadshow, would it violate the Open Meetings Act? Is there another way we can get the information? Can we have some examples to give an idea of different measurements of existing signs and enforcement procedures? Maybe some discussion of Champagne's experience. It won't be perfect. Obviously, the white light thing is a, you know, not going to allow us to get the full picture, but I think it would be helpful. I remember doing it last time, you know, Robert bringing in examples, and I thought it was helpful. So, is there anything else that we think, Mr. Trail?
Could I, just on the pedestrian, I mean, one of the biggest non-vehicular uses of the roadways are here, since we value biking so much in Urbana, is do any of the bike safety or, you know, any commissions or whatever dealing with it have any input on the effect of billboards like these on bike safety after dark?
You know, I think we have engineers on staff and access and plenty of studies to look at. I think for planning level things like our bike plan and studies, we go to BPAC and get input. For zoning text amendment, I don't know that that's really what they're set up to help advise us on. A narrow technical point, such as you're bringing up, I believe we have expertise, professional expertise in our engineering, maybe at RPC, that we can answer that. So I'm a little concerned about containment of this hearing and the evidence in this hearing. As I heard about a public forum, I don't even, you know, let's try to be lawful here.
Oh, totally, yeah.
You know, and try to keep things, you know,
If you could
clear
have someone on
to
city
all
staff
interested
speak to the
people,
issue
and
of
we're bringing
pedestrians and
evidence, a
bicycles,
lot of
that'd be great.
technical data, which, you know, and
Yep.
spending countless staff hours, months, and we'll continue to work at it. And it's not just staff, we've consulted with other experts as well. And, you know, you've made a lot of great comments and suggestions, and we'll come back. And we'll go to the appropriate sources, and we'll keep plugging away. But we've got to keep some containment here in your inquiry. So,
Well, don't let us do anything that is going to be illegal, and we won't do anything that's going to be illegal.
okay.
That's why we asked for legal opinion on a couple of these issues that are kind of out there. Okay, is there any other commentary that anybody, are you guys, as city staff, are you guys kind of clear on where we might try to get to a place where we can be comfortable making a ruling one way or the other?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think you've given us a really definite list of things to come back with, you know, things that you're pondering, and I think it'll make it easier, you know, next time or whenever you're ready to come up with some form of a recommendation.
That,
to the
I think
city
that would be
council,
great, because
so-
you have worked hard on this, and it probably is close to time for, this will be the third meeting next time, and so.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of progress is being made, so I appreciate everybody's hard work in piecing this out and studying and asking really good questions.
Okay, well, thank you. Without any consensus then, I guess we'll continue this until a future meeting of the Plan Commission. Hopefully the next one, if you guys can, you know, have time to work on it. So, thank you for your commentary as well. So now, turning to old business, we have the bylaws of the Plan Commission, which we cannot vote on again today, is my understanding, because of a couple of substantive changes that were made since the last discussion.
yes, sir. Last time there was a question about, we had this issue come up where the Plan Commission needs to elect an acting chair So if the chair is not available for a meeting, so should that be added to the order of business under Article 5 of the bylaws? The city attorney has said yes, it should. So we've made that change. So per the bylaws, we're presenting them at this meeting, and Plan Commission can vote on them at the next meeting.
Assuming we don't make any further changes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I missed the study session, so I'll try to be fast. I think you guys did a really fantastic job of bringing some things out since the time before when I was here when you discussed it. I don't know what constitutes a change and what doesn't, but I got a typo on Article 3, Section 4, and it's after the comma, shall be listed as A excused in the minutes of that meeting. I mean, it doesn't sound like that A needs to be in there. Just a piece of cleanup. I don't know if that means it's a substantive change that, yeah. I think that to Mr. Engstrom's point on the order of business on page 3, we changed the word elect to select on page 1, Article 3, Section 2. And then the order of business still uses the word elect. I mean, maybe we're splitting hairs. I don't necessarily think it has to be changed. Elect implies a vote. It could be a vote by acclamation, or, you know. Does anybody think that that's a problem, or does city staff think that's a problem? Using select versus elect?
I think it's good for it to be consistent and have select, and I think it's the same as the other typo. It's
okay.
very
Great.
inconsequential.
This might be a substantive change. It's Article 4, Section 5, about a quorum, and when a quorum is not present. I didn't notice this before, but it says public hearings may be held by less than a quorum of the commission. However, such public hearings shall be continued until a quorum is present. No case shall be decided without a quorum. So it seems to me like that first sentence kind of says two different things. It says you can hold a public hearing, but you have to continue it. In the past, we have held a public hearing, had some discussion, and then you have to continue it because you can't vote.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
But, so that's all that's saying. So you think that's clear enough?
Yeah, I think
Okay, great,
Yeah.
great.
It does sound like it doesn't prevent you from continuing, especially if
You have to
everyone's shown
continue.
up and, I mean, you want
Sure.
to go ahead and,
we've
with
done
those
it.
parts
We
that you
did-
can do
it's
without.
consistent with our practice is what I was, yeah. Okay, all right, so far I've passed 3 hurdles. Continued cases, Article 5, Section 2B. This is, what happens if it's the petitioner asking for a continuance. So you've got this Section B with the 1 and the 2. And this is cases which have been previously continued. It pertains to cases that have been previously continued, and the petitioner can basically ask for them to be continued. Section C says continuance may be granted to a specific time and date at the discretion of the chair for good cause shown upon any case if request made by staff or petitioner in advance of the meeting. I don't see how we need both B and C. In other words, if we can continue, if the chair can continue a case based on the staff or the petitioner's request prior to the meeting, or if I can continue a case during a meeting because we can't reach consensus, then why
They're
did,
two different things, I think.
are they, because I'm having trouble.
So what we just did was a
That's our decision, yeah.
Yeah, a continuation after the hearing. I think it's C, I can't remember. what
Yeah,
it
C was
is.
the one in advance.
To say that
yeah.
if a petitioner or a staff member is not prepared for a meeting that has been noticed,
Okay, I got
and
it.
they call up
At the time the case is
24
called.
hours before, and they say, you know, we're not gonna be ready, can we continue this case to the next meeting? I think that's what the other one is about, that they don't have to come and ask all of us if they can do that.
Yeah, okay, I'm fine with it now because,
Maybe we don't have to
Yeah.
come either.
yeah, right, that's right, that's right.
So you
yeah,
get to
yeah,
decide.
That's right. So it's at the time the case is called, I had missed it in B. So that's why I was confused. And I've got a question mark to myself that I forgot what it means, but let's see where it's at. This is Article 5, Section 5, the 5-minute time limit on audience participation. And I'm just specifically in the language, the prerogative of the chair to extend the 5-minute time limit, or if the chairperson does not enforce the time limit, the extension shall be decided without debate by a motion approved by the majority vote of the members. So if I just forget to watch the clock and it goes past, how does that apply to, I guess there has to be a motion. I mean, does there have to be a motion?
Well, if you recover, there doesn't. But if 50% of us disagree.
I understand that part. Yeah.
Then we
Yeah.
don't have to discuss it, we can.
Essentially, if I let somebody keep going on and you guys can make a motion to cut it off, is what that means.
Yeah, as I recall from the wording, we could also do the opposite.
Correct. You
You
can
can
make
cut
me
some-
extend the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just trying to be certain.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to do the study session. So now here's principles for public hearings. This is Article 6, Section 2D. The chair may require advance registration of persons and may persons who want to address a particular case and may set time limits. So this is not public participation. This is the case. That's an arbitrary. May set time limits. I mean, we could let Robert's rules and the will of the commission govern what the chair does, or we could make it a little bit more specific right there.
I think the purpose of that is if we have people stacked up outside the doors, which hasn't happened in
Not tonight.
several years.
Yeah.
That we might.
Sure, I get that, but does, I could say 1 minute.
Sort of whatever, yeah. And we get it.
Judicial review if someone decides.
Well, if I say 1 minute and you guys have an uprising, then it's not going to be 1 minute, but, so presumably the natural give and take of the commission would take care of that. I just want to make sure you guys are all right with that.
That language is the legal recommended language
It is?
for public hearings, that these are the things that you're allowed to do.
Right.
Yeah, you're allowed to register, you're allowed to set time limits, so it's helpful to have what we're allowed to do in the bylaws, so.
I agree with that. We were quite specific in the audience participation section about the time limits, and here we just say may set time limits. That's all.
And that's like verbatim from, the latest cases for public
If
hearings.
we're going to have to review these every year. If something happens this year that proves that, there's some concern that's founded there. Written material, this is F. Written material from the petitioner or opponents will be accepted by the secretary until the close of the public hearing. That's fine. But what we don't have anywhere in here that I could find is provision of written materials prior to the meeting that get distributed. And I know Ms. McCusick, who's addressed this many times on this, that's one of her concerns that she's raised about having the public have access to, if somebody comes into the meeting and presents evidence, that's one thing. But we had 3 pieces of communication, or 2 tonight and a couple more last time. Recently, our practice has been to put those on the table so that when people come in, they're going to be part of the public record. They can read those. But I didn't see anything in the bylaws that really tells us what we're supposed to do with those things. And I think maybe there should be something in the bylaws that tells us what we're supposed to do with testimony pertaining to the case from outside of the meeting, from prior to the meeting. Did you guys discuss that in the study session at all?
Suppose you could add something on communications, how those are dealt with.
I think, and I don't want us to, you know, we've been considering this for a long time, and I don't want to, I want us to get it done. But I think a section on communications that just says that we made it, you know, communications are, from any part of the public are accepted. They will be, copies will be passed out to the commissioners, and copies will be made available to the public prior to the start of the meeting. I mean, for now, there's a lot of specifics that we've heard about putting them on the website.
Doesn't that present the problem that someone who walks up and,
There's nothing we could do about that, except for make them part of the public record afterwards. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
The only issue is if we say specifically it has to be distributed prior to the meeting, then we would be telling people, if you want to have any physical evidence, materials, whatever, then you want to be to the attention of the...
At the start of the meeting.
Would have to be provided at the start of the meeting with enough time for staff to make I mean, whatever it is we think we need to do.
Yeah.
That would pretty much cut off anyone providing anything during the meeting.
Well, they could present
I don't
evidence.
think we can't do that. People need to be able to provide written
Oh, I
materials
agree with
during the
that.
hearing.
So I think that the whole before the meeting part, I think is, I don't think.
I was just, well, you tell me. I mean, I'm flexible on it. It's just something that it talks about how written materials can be distributed.
Couldn't we simply have a generic statement which says any materials presented to the commission to be part of their deliberation will be made available to the public?
That might do it. That might do it.
You have to be real specific about how, but basically guaranteeing the public will have access to the full record that we looked at.
Yeah, I think a little flexibility that way if
I'm fine
Carrie's
with that.
emailed some things or
Yep.
someone's picked something. I mean, the people get information in such different ways. We do provide it. We know we do that. We just have it in the list of the hearing, but we can
Well,
add
sure.
a section on communications and how we handle it
I-
generally.
Yeah, I like Mr. Trell, and Mr. Otto might have.
Well, I think we should be very careful to not imply that we're going to make any effort to distribute it or any timeline in advance. And
Yeah.
Article 7 says the file of material determinations related to each case will be kept by the secretary, da-da-da-da. That's definitive. If anyone wants to know, they can go there. As soon as we start saying that within 10 minutes after we receive an email communication, we'll post on the web, that's just no end of.
No, I agree with
But
that. Yeah.
I think that's all that we need to say. Anyone who wants to, has access to it under Article 8 and
Anything that's part of the record will be made accessible to the public.
and we already say that.
how exactly.
Yeah. But
Well, if you guys are fine with Article 8, Section 1, I believe, is that the one you're looking at?
yeah.
If you think
And
that covers the situation I'm talking
Number
about.
3 also says shall be public records subject to release.
And the Freedom of Information Act is, yeah, sure. If you guys think that covers the scenario, the materials I was talking about.
Any more language in here will be another opportunity for people to say,
Pull the thread, pull the thread. Yeah.
The only thing we could do is the only issue that, to me, that possibly grants the idea, what is part of the public record and not, and as long as we're procedurally clear enough that, you know, this thing that we got is part of the public record because they handed it to us, I mean, then I don't see any problem with a fairly generic statement about that. Yes, that's all going to be accessible to the public.
I agree with that. I was just thinking about these sort of ex parte communications we get from the public. But if you think this covers those, then I don't need any language changes at this time. So other than deleting that word "a,"
Ex parte are by definition not part of the record.
yeah, you're right. But
So,
prior to the
as
meeting.
long as we
yeah.
use the magic phrase, the
Yeah.
record, I
Yeah.
think we're covered.
Okay. Okay. Then I'm good. Any further commentary? Or, so we're only the two typographical changes. And in that case, we'll continue this to the next meeting, at which time I think we should be able to vote on it. 2 months later. But, we did a good job. We did due diligence, and so I appreciate it. So now we've got no new public hearings, no new business. Anyone care to address the Plan Commission on a topic that we haven't already covered? Is there a staff report?
Just a quick update on our new commissioner, Mr. Nagel. Unfortunately, he will not be able to join the commission. He couldn't make it work, so we are searching again for a 9th commissioner. But we appreciate his efforts. And
Yeah, absolutely. Is that it? It's a short staff report, Mr. Ings.
That's it.
Okay. We don't have a study session tonight, so therefore we are adjourned.